$50,000. That's what it cost my parents to make sure I never married Rhett Merritt.
I didn't know that yet.
Not at the moment I'm about to describe to you. At that moment, I only knew I was sitting on the floor of an emptied reception hall, still in the dress, while two men in black vests folded chairs around me like I was part of the furniture nobody had labeled. My name is Sloane. I was 31, and I was still wearing it, the whole white weight of it, even though the wedding had stopped happening 4 hours earlier. But that's not even the part that kept me up for the next 2 years. That part came later. That part had a frame around it. The hall smelled like lilies going soft in the heat, the good kind of wilting, the kind that means the flowers were real. Somewhere behind me, the band was zipping cables into cases, unhurried, the way people pack up after a job that's already been paid for. Half a cake sat on its stand near the door. No one had cut it.
No one was going to.
Ma'am, do you want us to box the centerpieces? A staff member, hovering, not unkind. I said yes. I don't remember deciding to. Down the hall, my mother's voice.
Light.
Managerial. Just stack the extra chairs against the wall. The venue will sort them Monday. Not a single word the whole evening about whether I was okay. That's when I noticed it. My father's checkbook sitting open on the gift table where the card box should have been. Pen capped neatly on top, like a case file someone had already closed. It was a Sunday. My mother always said Sundays were for things that matter. That's why I'd pick the date. I think about that a lot now, the way she said it was like a blessing when really it was a deadline. If your family has ever decided what you deserved before they ever asked what you wanted, stay with me. This one doesn't let go easily. It isn't a story about being left at the altar. It's a story about what he did with what they gave him. I was 9 the first time my mother taught me how to relevel a chair leg. Not with a kit, with her hands and mine under hers, and a block of sandpaper she'd cut down to the right size herself. You don't force it, she said. You find where it's actually uneven. Then you fix that part. Only that part. There was a version of my mother who only showed up when something was broken and worth saving. I used to think that's why she loved me, because I was always a little bit broken in some quiet, fixable way, and she liked the work of it. I built my whole adult life trying to stay exactly that broken. Not falling apart. Just unfinished enough to need her. That's the thing about being too desperate for approval. You don't notice you're doing it. You just notice that every decision you make has a detour built into it, a stop where you hold the thing up to her face first. The venue.
The dress. Rhett.
I introduced Rhett to my parents 3 times. Not because they hadn't met him, because the first 2 times hadn't counted. Mom had been tired. Dad had been in the middle of something. And I kept thinking if I just staged it better, timed it right, they'd finally see what I saw. Small things first. My brother's wife got promoted to regional manager, and at dinner that week my parents popped a bottle of champagne they'd apparently been saving. 2 months later, I told them my restoration studio had its first $60,000 quarter. My mother said, "That's nice, dear," and asked if anyone wanted more rice. Medium thing. When my brother bought his house, my parents wired the down payment the same week. No paperwork, a gift. Done. When I needed startup capital for the studio, I got a loan. An actual loan, interest rate, quarterly check-ins, a contract my father had drafted himself, like I was a vendor instead of a daughter. A large thing. The night I told them about the engagement, my mother didn't say congratulations. She said, "What does his family do?" I told her Rhett managed construction crews. The table went quiet in that specific way, not insulted, exactly. Recalibrating. I chose not to hear it. I refilled my water glass and kept talking like the silence hadn't landed. The checkbook came up again that fall, at the dinner where we discussed the cater deposit. My mother wrote the check with the same flourish she used to sign my field trip permission slips when I was 7. Fast, looping, done before you could ask a follow-up question. It looked like love. It had always looked like love. That was the problem. "I'll cover the deposit," she said. "We'll figure out the rest later." I thanked her. I actually thanked her sitting there at 31, grateful for permission to get married. I should tell you something about my father, too, even though he barely speaks in this story. He didn't need to. My mother decided things out loud. My father decided things in checkbooks. Between the two of them, there was never a real vote. Just a tally that got finalized somewhere I wasn't in the room. I didn't see it. None of us, not even Rhett, I'd find out later, saw the whole shape of what was coming. But here's what I didn't see. What none of us saw until it was sitting in a frame on someone else's wall, years later, with my mother's handwriting on it. The week before the wedding, small things stopped fitting together. Rhett went quiet on the phone in a way he never used to. Not cold, just careful. Like a man choosing his words from a smaller pile than usual. I told myself it was nerves. Grooms get nervous. I'd read that somewhere in one of those magazine sidebars nobody actually needs. My mother got warm. Too warm. She started calling him Rhett Honey, a name she'd never used for him before, not once in 2 years, and complimenting his tie at the rehearsal dinner like she was reading lines off a card she'd just been handed. The morning of the wedding, the gift table looked wrong. The card box had been moved to a side table, tucked against the wall, out of guest traffic. So it doesn't get knocked over, my mother said when I asked. She didn't look up from the seating chart. I'm overreacting, I told myself. Brides always think the air feels wrong on the day. That's just what the day does to you. I went looking for a bathroom in the hotel suite hallway, half a glass of champagne in, veil already pinned, and I passed my parents' door. It was closed. Not all the way. Hotel doors never close all the way unless someone's holding them shut on purpose. My mother's voice.
Low.
Satisfied in a way I'd only ever heard her use about a finished renovation. It's done. He took it. She'll never have to know why. My father, lower. 50,000 was a lot, Margot. It was cheap, she said, compared to what we'd have spent fixing this for the next 30 years. I stood there in my dress with my hand on the bathroom door frame and stared at the hallway carpet, that busy, swirling pattern hotels always use so you can't see the stains, and counted the loops in it.
I don't know why.
I just needed somewhere to put my eyes that wasn't the door. I knocked. I don't remember deciding to knock either. My mother opened it 3 inches, smiling already. The smile already arranged before she saw who it was.
Sloane.
You scared me. Is everything all right? I asked her what she meant. What was done? She didn't even flinch. That's the part one keep coming back to. Not the lie, the ease of it. We didn't take your fiancé away from you, Sloane, she said. We took away a mistake. I want to tell you I screamed. I want to tell you something that would make a good scene in a movie. Instead, I said, okay. Just that.
Okay.
And I walked back to the bridal suite and asked the coordinator to start telling people the wedding was off, due to unforeseen circumstances, the blandest phrase I could find, because for one day, I wanted to be the only person managing the story. I lost more than the wedding that afternoon. I lost the version of my childhood where the garage and the sandpaper and her hands over mine had meant what I thought they meant. Every warm memory got quietly refiled, the way you'd reclassify a document you realize was never actually about you. I unzipped my own dress for the first time in my life. There's a particular kind of quiet in a room where the only sound is a zipper going down slowly because your hands won't move any faster than that. There was one thing I didn't discover until much later, though, not what they'd done. I knew that within the hour, standing in that hallway. What I didn't know was what Rhett had done with it afterward. That detail would take 2 years to find me. And when it did, it hurt worse than the wedding ever had. 3 months later, I was behind on the studio loan. My parents' loan. The one with the interest rate and the quarterly check-ins. I hadn't called my mother back in 11 days. I kept meaning to. I just kept finding other things to do instead. Sand a drawer front that didn't need sanding, alphabetize varnish cans that were already alphabetized. One Sunday morning, I sat on the workshop floor next to a 1940s armchair I'd been restoring for 6 weeks without finishing a single joint. The frame was beautiful underneath all the old upholstery, somebody's grandmother's chair, somebody's careful joinery from 80 years ago. I'd stripped it down to the wood and then just stopped. Sat with it. Some mornings I'd put my hand flat on the seat rail and not do anything else. I hadn't cried that week. I want to be specific about that because it matters. I wasn't sad anymore. I was something quieter than sad. Empty, maybe, except empty isn't really the right word either. It was more like a room after someone finally stops talking. The air hadn't filled back in yet. A delivery driver dropped off a case of varnish and lingered a second, looking at the chair. Somebody thought that was worth fixing instead of throwing out, he said. That's the whole job, right? He left. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Longer than the sentence deserved, probably. But it kept turning over. I had spent my whole life trying to be the thing worth fixing. I understood, sitting on that floor, that my mother had never loved fixing broken things. She loved deciding which things were worth fixing and which ones got quietly, efficiently removed. I had spent 31 years auditioning for the first category. I was done. I am going to say something now, and I want you to hear it the way I finally heard it, sitting on a workshop floor on a Sunday with sawdust on my knees. I didn't lose Rhett because he wasn't enough. I lost him because my mother had already decided, long before I met him, exactly how much any of us were allowed to be worth. I had just never been the one being priced before. My own checkbook was sitting on the workbench, the studio's still tied to my parents' loan. An old habit took over. I picked up a blank check, started writing Mom on the payee line, some half-formed plan to send a partial payment as a kind of peace offering, an apology for a thing I hadn't done. I stopped halfway through the M, tore it in half.
Didn't send anything.
I didn't decide what I was going to do that morning. I decided who I wasn't going to be anymore. Not for sale. Not auditioning. Whatever came next, it wasn't going to come with a payee line on it. 2 years passed. I paid off the studio loan in full 8 months ago. I keep the canceled check pinned above my workbench, the first object in my life that's ever felt entirely mine, more than the ring ever did, more than the dress. The studio runs 3 part-time restorers now, all younger than me, all slightly afraid of the bandsaw in a way I find oddly reassuring. I have one close friend. Greer from college is the kind of friend who refers to your work instead of just liking your posts. Greer sent me a commercial contract last spring, a boutique restaurant group renovating a historic property downtown, the kind of job that, 2 years ago, would have required a phone call to my mother before I'd even let myself on it. I didn't make that call.
I just took the job.
That's not a strategy. That's just what an independent life looks like once you stop narrating it to someone else first. Partway through the project, an invoice came through listing a silent partner in the ownership group, someone who'd specifically requested the restorer Greer recommended. For one ugly half-second, I wondered if it was someone connected to my parents, checking on me from a distance, the way they check on everything. I almost walked away from the contract rather than be watched. I didn't walk away. The work mattered more than the watching. I'd spent 31 years organizing my choices around an audience. I wasn't going to lose a $40,000 contract to the ghost of one. The final walkthrough was scheduled for a Friday. I drove over with my tool bag and a folder of paint match samples, expecting to sign off on restored wall paneling and go home. The owner's assistant showed me into the office instead of the dining room. Rhett was standing behind the desk. There was a check on the wall behind him.
Framed.
Plain black frame, the kind you'd buy for a diploma. I didn't understand what I was looking at, not right away. Then I read the handwriting. My father's on the pay to the order of line, that specific slant he uses, the one that signed my school permission slips 100 times. And in the memo field, smaller looping, for stepping aside. My mother's hand, $50,000. I stood there in my work boots, paint samples still in my hand, and I didn't say anything for a long moment. Neither did he. I framed it the week after, Rhett said. Quiet, not proud, not as a trophy. I couldn't decide if I should be ashamed of taking it or ashamed of how easy they made it. I figured I'd look at it every morning until I knew which. He told me he built this whole restaurant group on that money and a decade of overtime he never talked about. He said some nights he hated himself more than he ever managed to hate them. That's the part that's almost funny if you let it be. My mother spent $50,000 to make sure I never found out the truth, to control the story, keep it quiet, keep it clean. And that exact money built the business that put me, 2 years later, standing in this office, looking at the proof on the wall. The thing she paid for to bury it is the thing that dug it back up. I left without finishing the walkthrough. I drove straight to my parents' house. I don't remember most of that drive. I remember the photo of the check on my phone, glowing on the passenger seat every time I glanced down at a red light. My mother was arranging flowers at the dining table when I came in. Sunday flowers. She does that every week, fresh stems, same vase, same spot. She didn't look up right away. "We were protecting you from a mistake," she said. "One you were too young to see." "You didn't protect me," I said. "You priced me. And then you let me spend 2 years thinking I wasn't worth staying for." She kept arranging the flowers. Adjusted a stem that didn't need adjusting. "You spent $50,000 making sure I never found out the truth, Mom," I said. "You should have spent 5 minutes asking me what I actually wanted." Her hand still went over the flowers. Not dramatic. No tears, no raised voice. Just a stillness, the kind you see in someone watching their own reflection in a window for the first time and not entirely recognizing what's looking back. She set the shears down. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny it either. I stood in that doorway for a long time. I didn't sit down at the table. I didn't walk back out to my car right away either. I just stood there, in the only house that had ever priced me, finally understanding the exact number it had cost. It's a Sunday morning again, 8 months later. The workshop is quiet except for the radiator clicking on. I sign a check to a fabric supplier, my own account this time, my own name printed across the top, and pin the receipt next to the loan payoff check on the board above my desk. 2 checks. Same board. Completely different meanings. I still keep them pinned there, actually. They used to mean someone else deciding what I was worth. Now they just mean the lights stay on, and I'm the one who turned them on. I see my parents twice a year now. Holidays, mostly, in rooms with other people in them, where the conversation stays shallow enough for everyone to survive it. I traded the kind of family that fixes everything quietly for the kind of solitude that's actually mine. I chose that trade. I want to be clear about that. Nobody made me. I chose it. I wonder sometimes whether Rhett and I were ever really in love, or whether we were just 2 people my mother priced separately on the same afternoon for the same reason. I don't know if I'll ever be sure. Most Sundays, that's a question I can sit with instead of one that keeps me up. If you're the one in your family who's always been quietly audited instead of simply loved, you already know exactly what I mean. You don't need me to explain it further. I'll be here next Sunday. Same as always.